Welcome in at Big Ten Today. We are fueled by Gatorade. I'm Dave Revson. A happy Thanksgiving Eve to you and yours. Lots to talk about in terms of the festivities for this weekend, and that includes an unbelievable rivalry week. It is quite a weekend buffet of football for us. Ashley Adamson joins me as she does every Wednesday. And Ash, I cannot wait for this football. I don't want to wish away Thanksgiving, best holiday of the year, but man, the football looks great.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dave, and it's always good to be with you. I'm trying to wrap my mind around the fact that this is the last weekend of the regular season. Like I don't know where the time went, but I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving. I am sorry that I'm not dressed in my full turkey regalia that I promised I was going to wear, but maybe I'll bring it into the studio and wear it on Saturday night.
I think that would be great. Yeah, I think a turkey suit on the final drive is just what people are looking for.
Give the people what they want.
It's always been your motto. Let's get into the big story. The CFP committee gave us what we wanted, which was the latest rankings last night. Of course, they were obligated to do that. And the big question from the Big Ten's point of view was where Indiana would end up after its loss to Ohio State. And the answer is they dropped 5 spots to number 10, so still in the bracket, not really in a position to get jumped either. The rest of the Big Ten held steady. Oregon first, Ohio State second, Penn State fourth. Illinois moved up 1 spot to number 23. Now remember, the seeds are different than the rankings due to the fact that the 4 highest ranked conference champs are guaranteed the top 4 seeds. Those 4 projected to be Oregon, Texas, Miami, and Boise State. So Ohio State would be the 5th seed. They would get projected Big 12 champ Arizona State at home. Then they would head to Boise were they to win. Indiana would now have to go on the road. The Hoosiers' opponent would be Penn State, which reinforces the fact that teams from the same conference can play one another in the first round of the CFP. In fact, there'd be 2 such matchups, Tennessee going to Georgia. Actually, let's start with IU. I think they're going to be fine based on where they were. You'd be really nervous if they were 11, 12 is a spot you certainly don't want to get in because you've got these guaranteed bids for the top 5 conference champs, and certainly it looks like one of them will be ranked below 12. So 10 feels like a safe spot were they to beat Purdue, although I think it wouldn't hurt to beat Purdue handily, but I think a win in Indiana's in.
Yeah, I'm with you. And Dave, this was obviously the thing that we were all really interested to see. What was the committee going to do with Indiana after losing to Ohio State? And I'm sure Hoosier fans should be relieved to see them stay in the top 10, which is absolutely where they should be, especially given the carnage in the SEC. So hat tip to Alabama and Ole Miss. They certainly helped the Hoosiers with their losses this past weekend. But Ward Manuel, the CFP committee chair and Michigan's AD, he spoke highly of IU when he was asked about how the committee views them. He said, look, they were impressed with some of the things that Indiana did in that game against the Buckeyes. They played well, he said, and at times, when you look at overall, their body of work was strong enough to keep them in the top 10. So as long as IU handles Purdue this weekend, I'm with you. I think they're in great shape to make the playoff. Dave, here's the thing that I keep thinking about as I'm looking at this bracket, and we've talked about it a little bit, but as we get closer, it's just worth bringing up again. Oregon is the number 1 seed, may have a harder path than Ohio State at number 2, because as it stands, if the Ducks, win the Big Ten championship, they would get that first round bye, which is great. But then they would likely face Georgia, either Georgia or Tennessee in the quarterfinals. You look at Ohio State's path, or whomever ends up being the 5, they wouldn't get a bye, but they'd get to host a home game against Arizona State, followed by a quarterfinal matchup with Boise. So in a world where the Ducks lose the Big Ten championship in a close game and, I don't know, possibly end up the 5 seed, we might look back and say that was actually the better path. And I think, there's something also about getting to be one of the first teams to ever host a playoff game on campus. So that's one of the things I'm most interested in. What will the committee do with teams that make it to and lose their conference championship? And is being the 5 seed ultimately going to be the better path than the 1?
I agree with you. I think if Oregon and Ohio State both take care of business this week and win their games against Washington and Michigan respectively, I think then we're in a position where the loser of the Big Ten championship game definitely gets that number 5 seed, and the winner of the Big Ten championship game would get the number 1 seed. And I am with you. I am not sure that the 5 seed isn't a better spot to be in. I understand every time you play a game, Ashley, there's a chance that you lose that game. And there's also the wear and tear of football. And so when you have a week off while everyone else is playing and knocking into one another. I do think there is an advantage there to heal up, but I'm with you. I mean, who would not sign up for Arizona State at home and then going to Boise State? Look, I think part of this is due to the fact that the Big 12 just doesn't have a powerhouse team. And I think the assumption was that those Power Four conferences would all have really worthy teams in those top four spots. And again, I'm not saying whoever gets in from the Big 12, assuming they get someone in. And by the way, there is a possibility in all this that the Big 12 gets shut out. I mean, as was pointed out last night,
is wild.
They are not guaranteed a spot. No power conference is guaranteed a spot. All we know is the top 5 highest ranked conference champs are guaranteed a spot. So who's to say that, for instance, if Tulane finishes up really strong and looks great against Memphis and then blows out Army and the Big 12 has all kinds of chaos, that Tulane wouldn't be the 5th highest ranked team. But I think the assumption was that 5th highest ranked conference champ. But I think the assumption was that all 4 of those teams would be really good teams in that bracket, and then, you know, that you wouldn't be in a path like the one that potentially the 5 seed right now, Ohio State, is looking at, with 2 games that just about anyone would sign up for.
Yeah. No, I'm with you 100%. I think it's going to be really interesting. And again, because this is the first year of the 12-team playoff, that is what makes this so fun. And I know I've said it, but like, now that we're here, this expanded playoff is wonderful. I mean, it has made it so much more interesting, this final, we've never had a month like this in college football, with so many teams that we're talking about and all the different things that could happen, and not to mention the parity in teams that always win, losing games that they don't normally lose. So it has been fun, and it's going to be wild to see what it actually looks like when that final ranking comes out that actually matters on December 8th. I also I want to shout out Brett Bielema's team. Illinois ranked number 23.
Yes.
A win against Northwestern would give them their first 9-win season since, I think, the 07 Rose Bowl team. Kurt Cignetti and Dan Lanning are the front runners for Coach of the Year, I would imagine, but we should not overlook what Bielema has done. So, I think we can continue to talk about these top 4 teams, but Illinois, they've got an impressive resume when you look at the other 3 lost teams that are ranked right now. Dave.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think they're getting the short shrift. Like, I don't understand why Illinois isn't ranked higher. Like, look at the teams that they've lost to. The teams they've lost to are combined 27-6. I mean, they've lost to 2 teams that are going to for sure be in the playoff. Their other loss is Minnesota, who's really good. They've beaten 3 Power 4 bowl teams. They beat Kansas, who has been incredibly disruptive here and has played really well down the stretch. Like, I guess I don't really understand why we're talking about Illinois at 23. Like, I think Illinois deserves to be much higher. I think they need to be in that conversation of the better 3 lost teams in the country. I understand. I mean, I think the challenge is that among those wins over the bowl teams, the Power 4 bowl teams, I don't think there's anyone that just blows you away. But, man, they've beaten some really good teams along the way. And, again, like, you look at who they've lost to and you look at what the story might be where their schedule a little different. I mean, again, there are the vagaries of scheduling and who you end up playing and who you don't end up playing in conference play. But Illinois is a really good and really worthy team. So I'm glad you brought him up. The other thing I want to say is, I mean, the Indiana-Penn State thing would be fascinating, right, to have what is in essence a conference game, although 2 teams that did not play one another playing in that opening round. But just the notion, again, like, it seems almost certain to me, if Penn State beats Maryland, they're going to host a game in the first round. And you talk about great scenes. State College and Beaver Stadium is one of the best scenes in all of college football. And to have them hosting a game in the college football playoff after all of their close calls of not being able to make it to the playoff through the years, I think that would be a fitting way to get this thing started.
Yeah. Oh, Dave, I'm with you. And, again, it almost all came crashing down at Minnesota last weekend. It's a reminder that it is so hard to win conference games,
yes,
especially this time of year. But we talked about at the beginning of the season, like Penn State, if the playoff had been 12 teams from the beginning, Penn State would have already made this 6 times more than any other team. So this is a long time coming, and you hope for their sake that they can go out and have a great showing, against Maryland on senior day. And I know we expect them to. The last thing I would bring up that I think is interesting when you're looking at the standings, USC has a chance to do their new Big Ten brethren a very big favor this week. You know, obviously, if the Trojans find a way to beat Notre Dame on Saturday and knock them out of the CFP, that would give the Big Ten more breathing room. Indiana would obviously benefit as they're 3 spots behind the Irish in the rankings right now. But I also look at that Penn State squad who's sitting at number 4. And I saw some pundits on social media advocating that Notre Dame should be ranked ahead of Penn State, which to that I say you shouldn't lose to NIU, and then we can talk. But the larger point is when you're comparing Penn State and Notre Dame, USC will be their only common opponent,
right,
which is an important data point. So the Nittany Lions needed overtime to beat USC. Let's say Notre Dame blows out USC. Would that give the committee enough to move them ahead of Penn State in the rankings? So I don't want to get too granular when there's a lot of still moving pieces, but the bottom line is I think all of our Big Ten friends should be pulling for Lincoln Riley and the Trojans this weekend. That's
no doubt
at the calls.
I agree. And you look at what USC has done. I mean, being in the lead in every single game in the fourth quarter this year, I don't think it's at all unreasonable. They have ruined some really good Notre Dame seasons through the years.
Yes,
it's
they have.
Huge rivalry, yes, as you know. So we'll talk a little bit more about that one as we continue on the show now. And, Coach, we are going to get to your team in a moment, but I did want to talk to you about CVC first. For people who don't know a whole lot about it, give us a sense for the way that Coaches versus Cancer brings college basketball coaches together.
Well, it's all about awareness. You know, I think, listen, most everybody, and certainly within our staff and my family, have been impacted in some way by cancer. And any way that we can use the game and to kind of rally together coaches across the country to raise awareness for cancer research, I think is a great thing.
It's an amazing organization. They raise about $10 million per year, CVC does, for cancer research. I mentioned there's a great package for Ohio State basketball fans, a chance to get really up close and personal with your team. Give us a sense for that item up for bid at the auction.
Yeah, we're trying to provide some unique access on a game day into our program, and certainly access to shoot around, you know, tickets close to the bench, in and out of the locker room, facility tour. Maybe if we can raise enough, you know, get some input on the first play, whatever we got to do to help raise money. We want to certainly, you know, be a part of this.
Well, I know women's coach Kevin McGuff has offered a similar package. So for Buckeye basketball fans, I mean, as you say, a chance to really be up close and personal. And you mentioned the impact that cancer's had on all of us. Everyone has a story. But I know for your staff, in particular for Dave Dickerson, who lost his wife, Lorette, a couple years ago to cancer, it has impacted them tremendously. Give us a sense for the way that you have seen Coach Dickerson kind of get through what has been an incredibly difficult time.
Well, you know, he's a special man. He's been a coach for a long time, and, you know, got to see both he and Lorette and spend some time with them during that process. But to see how strong she was and how strong Dave has been has really been, you know, it's just been incredible to see. And cancer certainly, you know, has impacted Dave and his family significantly. My mom lost her best friend a few years ago to cancer, and so it's one of those things that if you get a chance to sit down and talk to people, you find out that almost everybody has a story, or, you know, there's someone who has been a part of their life who was impacted. And, you know, we're reminded certainly this time with a cause like this of how significant it impacted Dave on our staff, and just how strong he's been has been something very special for us to witness and see.
Well, again, appreciate everything you're doing, appreciate everything CVC is doing, and again, encourage people to get involved in the bidding. Again, you see the QR code on the screen. Amazing holiday gift opportunities for you or for someone in your life. So please participate for those who are watching. I do want to ask about your team, Coach, because I think your team's been a really good story here early on in the year in a Big Ten that frankly has been filled with some really good men's basketball stories. This is your first year as the full-time head coach. What has that adjustment been like for you?
Well, you know, speaking of staff, our staff is really experienced, and Dave Dickerson leads that way. But you go on down, with our assistant coaches, the programs that they came from to be a part of this one, we've leaned on their experience, and it's been a great help for us. We've been able to prepare really well. I'm excited about just how our team has grown. I think with so much newness in our program, new staff, new players, it was hard to maybe anticipate exactly how quickly our chemistry would form on the court. We saw right away just an organic chemistry form off the court, but been really impressed with how quickly it's formed on the court. And I think you're seeing that in the way we've played.
So it sounds like the chemistry is the thing that you'd be most pleased with to this point. What else has stood out to you where you look at it and say, that's gone well?
Well, I think our effort, we've had, it's now through multiple games, almost weekly, I'm getting a text message or a call from a former player who's talking about just they love how hard we're playing. And that's really important to me, that our former players are proud of the way we're playing. But for, unprovoked conversations and kind of notes to be dropped of, hey, coach, we're really proud of just how hard guys are playing. And I think, we're seeing that pay dividends so far, both offensively and defensively.
Well, you mentioned offense. I think that jumps out to people. You've gone over 100 points in 2 straight games, which hadn't happened in decades at Ohio State. But you were talking about text messages. I was texting with Doug Gottlieb, the Green Bay coach, who's a former colleague of mine, after they played you guys the other night, and he was raving about your defense, saying it was as good as any that he has seen. How has that become a staple of this program once again? Because it felt like before you took over last year, that was an area where, frankly, Ohio State had fallen off a bit.
Well, I think to be good in this league, you have to defend well. And, we have a roster full of two-way players. I think that's an important part to know. We have some really good individual defenders, which certainly helps your team defense. But I've been really impressed with how connected we've been defensively. We've really grown in our communication. We're executing our defensive game plan really well. We're able to make adjustments on the fly. I think it speaks to the experience and maturity that we have within our team. But that combination of some good, talented individual defenders and complete buy-in and connection, from schemes and just our togetherness and toughness we're playing with, I think is a big reason why we've had some success defensively. And listen, we rely on our defense to ignite our offense. We want to be aggressive defensively. I just think you have to do that in this league to be successful. So, thankfully we've been able to get off to a good start, but listen, we got to continue to grow. We certainly haven't arrived yet to where we want to be defensively, and we'll continue to push that and to play with that urgency we talk about on a daily basis. I've been happy to see our guys do that.
Bruce Thornton really off to an unbelievable start. He's among the Big Ten leaders in assists. He is shooting the ball so well. You've got a number of players who are just shooting the lights out. But what has Bruce in particular as a holdover meant to this team?
Well, Bruce sets the standard, for how we work in this program. He's not an everyday guy. I've said this. He's an every rep guy. He goes hard. He spends extra time, from the way he recovers and manages his day and his nutrition. And he's a pro's pro. And I think you're seeing his game get to another level because of the consistency at which he works. So I think he's one of the very best guards in the country. And, he continues to help us raise the bar just week after week with how consistent he is.
You're heading into a stretch now, Jake, starting with the game against Pitt coming up on Friday, of 4 straight games against high major teams. What are the biggest questions that you still want to see answered about your team in that stretch?
I want us to continue to get better at taking care of the ball. As we've played faster, we've had some possessions that I think we'd like to have back and get something better. So we got to be mindful of, our turnovers, and then rebounding on both sides of the ball. I feel like we can be a good rebounding team, and we've had some good rebounding games. This will be a significant, test in those 2 areas, and we need to handle them well, starting with Friday.
Well, let's talk about Friday real quick before we let you go. Give us the scouting report on the Panthers, who are playing some really good ball early on this year.
Yeah, really good team, well coached. I think you watch, they're running a variety of actions offensively. They seem to be playing really well together, and they're tough defensively. You know, their numbers are really good, and certainly they've played some challenging opponents and played well in some of those games. So I think first and foremost, though, well coached, and you know, some really good guard play. It's going to be a battle.
Well, looking forward to it. Jake, thank you for your time. Have a great Thanksgiving, and thanks again for all you do in the fight against cancer. It's much appreciated.
Thanks. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Really was a lot to think about for Michigan as they head into the huge rivalry game, as Ashley rejoins me now. And as we think about rivalry week in the Big Ten and who's got the most at stake, Ashley, I would contend that game, among the ones that figure to be close and are the big rivalries, I think in that game, Ohio State has the most at stake. I would contend, and I would almost never say this, but I think there's a unique set of circumstances here that Michigan may have the least at stake. And again, I understand what a huge rivalry it is. I'm not saying Michigan fans don't want to win the game, but you won the national championship last year, and you just got Bryce Underwood last week. I think they're okay for a year, but man, Ohio State has to win this game.
Yeah, Dave, I'm with you. And I'm sure Michigan fans would say, well, wait a minute, think about what it would do for our season if we could find a way to spoil Ohio State's,
Sure,
final game. But when you're talking about what's at stake, I'm with you. Of all the really important games, to me, it's clear that the Buckeyes have the most on the line. The obvious tangible carrot, of course, is that a win over Michigan gets you to the Big Ten championship. But Dave, you know this better than me, having covered this rivalry for so many years, what this game means. And when you consider that there is not a single player on Ryan Day's roster who has ever won this game, it's one of the reasons a lot of these seniors said they came back. And I think we've talked about it. There's a wider concern that rivalry games are getting a little bit watered down because of conference expansion and the endless roster turnover. But that is never going to be a concern for Ohio State and Michigan, because you can't play for one of these teams and not understand how important this is. And I love what Will Howard said yesterday. He said, it's not a rivalry, it's a way of life. And from the moment he got to Columbus, he was like, look, I knew this thing was a different animal. He apparently learned very quickly that you don't wear blue in the building and you don't say the M word. So this is going to be a great chapter in this rivalry. And I'm with you. I think for all of the reasons, Ohio State has the most at stake of a lot of teams who have a ton at stake this week.
You mentioned Will Howard's comments. I mean, how about some of the things that Ryan Day has said this week? I mean, he called losing to Michigan the worst thing that has happened to his family. I mean, it's staggering when you think about that. And he said the same thing. It's not a game. It's a way of life for us. So, and again, I'm not suggesting this game doesn't mean a lot to Michigan. It means a lot to Michigan every year. They would love to beat Ohio State. I'm just saying, I think there's a lot more at stake for the Buckeyes this year, given what Michigan has done these past few years. Okay, so Ohio State has the most at stake in those rivalry games. Who else do you think has a lot at stake?
You know, honestly, Dave, I think other than the teams vying to make the playoff, because those are all critical games that they're going to play, I'm not sure that anybody has more at stake this weekend than Wisconsin. Yeah. So 22 straight years, they've been weekend than Wisconsin. Yeah. So 22 straight years, they've been to a bowl game, and if they don't beat Minnesota on Friday, they will miss out on the postseason for the first time since before the majority of these players were even alive. Like 2002 was the last year the Badgers didn't have a postseason to look forward to, and this is a program where the floor is a bowl game. They've been to one in 27 of the last 28 years. And the Gophers, this is not going to be an easy game. They've shown, obviously, they can play with and beat anyone in the country. They came this close to knocking off Penn State last week. So in terms of just what's at stake, to me, I think if Wisconsin's 22-year bowl streak comes to an end in front of your home fans to your hated rival, it will be hard not to feel like this was a pretty significant step back for Luke Fickell in year two. So that's another one that I've got, on my radar. And Dave, I think the other team playing in a rivalry game that has a ton on the line, obviously, would be the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, I want to talk about Wisconsin, but before we move on, because I agree with you wholeheartedly on Wisconsin. You mentioned the bowl streak. I mean, the other thing to think about is they came into this year, they had been ranked, Ashley, for 27 straight years. Like at least at one point in the season, they had appeared in the AP poll. That goes back to 1996. That streak is obviously going to end this year. And then you just think about more broadly, right? Luke Fickell's 12-12 right now. I have all the faith in the world in Luke Fickell. I think he is a fabulous coach. But he was asked why this team has been so inconsistent after the Nebraska game, and he said, I can't put a finger on it. You have to figure out why. Your job is to put a finger on it. And I think that bowl practices would really help them, Ashley, to figure out, hey, what's gone wrong here? They made change with Phil Longo, so how can we get this thing back to where we expect it to be playing in a bowl? I mean, presumably in that scenario, they beat Minnesota and they be in one, but to be ranked every year and to be competing at the very top of the league. So I'm with you. You mentioned Oregon. I mean, you have more insight into the Oregon-Washington rivalry. I think there's a ton of pressure on Dan Lanning. I just think you want to go positive into that Big Ten championship game. The offense hasn't been great, frankly, these last couple games. So I think maybe with Tez Johnson back, that gives you a chance to be going in with a full head of steam. But give me your insight. Like, help me understand Oregon and Washington and the pressure the Ducks might be feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I will just tell Big Ten fans who haven't paid attention much to this rivalry, like, don't sleep on this game. Yes, the Ducks have already locked up their spot in the Big Ten championship, but this is as intense and as bitter of a rivalry as I have ever been around or covered. And the Washington Huskies have been Dan Lanning's kryptonite. Like, shout out to Tony Krastercone, who's the voice of the Huskies. He pointed out yesterday that Lanning lost to Georgia in his first game as a head coach. Since then, he's 0-3 against the Huskies, and he's 33-1 against everybody else. So this game, it obviously matters to the fan base. It matters to the players. And knowing how competitive this coaching staff is, you know it matters to them a great deal. I'm excited to watch Jabbar Muhammad, kind of the fun understory in this game. He's a terrific corner who transferred to Oregon from Washington. This is a guy, now he's wearing green, but he tormented the Ducks last year. In the Pac-12 championship game, he held Troy Franklin, who was Oregon's best receiver, to his worst game of the year. He finished, I think, with 34 receiving yards. So he obviously practiced against Denzel Boston and Giles Jackson all of last year. He knows them very well. He was very complimentary of both of their skill sets when he was asked yesterday about what it's like to be playing on the other side of this rivalry. But I just think that the Ducks, yes, they're already in the Big Ten championship, but there is a ton of stake in this game. And it's one of the true bitter rivalries in all of college football.
And again, it's not like these were under the radar games, but I think sometimes people just need to be reminded, particularly since these teams weren't in the Big Ten last year. Washington beat Oregon by 3 twice last year. I mean, essentially, you could make the argument that Washington prevented Oregon certainly from being in the playoff and maybe from having a shot at winning the national championship. So this is it's a major game. No doubt. Second time in 4 years, Northwestern is the field hockey national champs, and both titles came on the same field. They won it in 2021 in Ann Arbor, topping Liberty. Won it again Sunday in Ann Arbor, destroying St. Joe's 5-0. Cats finished the season with an amazing 23-1 record, outscoring their 4 NCAA tourney opponents 18-4. The title came 39 years to the day after Tracey Fuchs, the woman known as the Michael Jordan of field hockey, won her first national title as a player at UConn, where she was a 3-time All-American and National Player of the Year. Now with 2 national titles as a coach and counting. Tracey Fuchs joins us now. Today's big interview. Coach, we call you the Michael Jordan of field hockey. We might need to start calling you the Phil Jackson of field hockey too, as the coaching accolades continue to pile up. Congratulations. How does winning a second compare to winning the first?
Thanks so much, David. It feels great. I mean, we had really high expectations this year with 8 seniors coming back and a loaded team, and just so happy and proud that we were able to bring another championship back to Northwestern.
What was the mentality coming out of the Big Ten tournament, Tracey? You had the one loss. You lost the Big Ten championship game to Michigan. How did you refocus your team as you headed towards the NCAAs?
Yeah, honestly, it didn't take long. We actually played pretty well in that game, and Michigan came out and got a goal. But, they bounced back pretty quickly. It had been a really consistent season. We were happy with the way we were playing, and we were ready for NCAAs.
Well, you clearly were. The championship game, your team came out on fire. You scored all 5 goals in the first half. That's atypical of field hockey, as you know, particularly in a championship type game. How do you account for the amazing start? Yeah,
I mean, the team was ready. They were focused. The leaders and captains were definitely in a zone. And, they just came out so strong. I knew right from the first whistle that this was going to be a good match for us. And, a few fell early. We hit the post early in the game, but after that, we were able to, get a few goals. And once you do that, you can play a little bit more free and comfortable, and the nerves go away.
I know you're certainly not relaxing when you're on the sideline, but you're up 5-0. It's the second half. Northwestern hadn't given up more than 5 goals in a game in 7 years. So, the chances of not winning it at that point are highly unlikely. As you're watching that second half unfold, Tracey, with a comfortable lead, what was going through your mind about kind of this powerhouse program that you've built?
Right up until the fourth quarter, we just pretended the score was 0-0. But it wasn't until sometime in the fourth quarter where I really felt I could relax. Anything can happen in sport, but we had control of the game. We were playing good defense. So it was a fun game for us, a fun game for the team. And, so happy that obviously we came out on top.
Tracey, you got to Northwestern in 2009. You didn't make the NCAA tournament for the first time until 2014. And now you look at this last decade, and it's just been amazing. This was the 4th straight year Northwestern's been in the national championship game. How do you account for what has happened here? Like, how do you go from being a very good program to the best program in the country?
Yeah, I attribute a lot of it to my staff. We've been together for 7 and 9 years. When we recruit, we go after the top players, and obviously Northwestern sells itself. And it takes time to build a culture, to build a championship team, and we did it the right way, and hopefully it's here to stay for the next decade or so.
Northwestern has some real powerhouse women's programs. Obviously, Kelly Amanda-Hiller's had incredible success with the lacrosse program. Kate Drohan in softball. They've got a new stadium coming online, which is going to be amazing. Emily Fletcher in golf. You can kind of go down the list. Why do you think Northwestern has been such a good place for women's athletics?
Yeah, I think one, the school sells itself academically and athletically. And, our athletic department believes in women's sport and knows that we can do well here. And, I have Kelly and Kate and Em, as 3 of my mentors and really, really good friends. I think Kelly Amante was really happy we lost that game to Michigan. She just kept coming into the office and telling me, you needed that. So, when you have people like that and, Northwestern Athletic does it right, it's easy for me. And I'm just so proud and grateful to work here.
How much do you lean on one another for advice?
A lot. Ever since COVID, the coaches really have come together and bonded and really bounced stuff off of each other. We've got a great hallway over at Walter with the soccers and lacrosse, so cross country. We all go through the same things. It's a different sport, but there's so much more than coaching than just going out there and doing the X's and O's. So amazing group of people that I work with.
Tracey, there's so much changing in college athletics right now. What does the new revenue share world mean for a powerhouse women's program like yours?
Nobody's really sure what it looks like down the road. I know Northwestern is going to support their women's athletes as they always do, but it's kind of up in the air. It's like we don't know what NCAA field hockey or anything's going to look like in 5 years. So you just have to go out and do your day-to-day and, hope that down the line that your sport and your team is valued. And I'm sure Northwestern is going to do it right.
Any special plans for celebrating the title? Do you go on a cruise? Do you have a spa day? Is there something that you're going to do for yourself, or is it just simply back to the grind?
No, I'm going to take a little break here. It's been a long year for me, along with Maddie and Ashley, who are all through the Olympics. But I do get to sing at the Wrigley game on Saturday, so I better heal my voice a little bit for the seventh inning stretch at a football game. And then I'm going to go take a nice vacation in Arizona sometime in December and, just be home for the holidays with my family and just enjoy life for a little bit.
Outstanding. Well-deserved. Good luck with the singing on Saturday. I've been there. It's a little bit of pressure, just so you know, when you look out on that crowd.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun. I'll practice.
I'm sure it will be. Hey, this has been great. Tracey, congratulations on yet another amazing national championship. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, everybody. Go Cats.
It's time for we're watching 4 intriguing storylines heading into the weekend. Where are you starting, Ashley?
We talked about rivalry weekend, Dave, and we kind of mentioned USC at the top, but the battle for the jeweled shillelagh is what I've got my eye on. USC Notre Dame, I think it's the best intersectional rivalry in college football. And yeah, the Trojans could do the Big Ten a solid by beating the Irish and knocking them out of the playoff. But for USC, you win this game and think about what it does to the narrative of their season overall. Obviously, 7-5 is not the standard at USC, but if they close out the season 3-0 after making a change at quarterback, and those wins are over Nebraska, UCLA, and a top 5 Notre Dame team, there would be a lot more hope and energy around this program headed into year 4 under Lincoln Riley. So I'm looking forward to that one. Dave, how about you?
I agree with you on that one. 50th anniversary, by the way, of the huge comeback, 1974. Irish went up 24-0. USC scored 55 straight in that one to ruin Notre Dame's season. We'll see if they can do it again. I'm interested in who starts at quarterback for Washington in that game we were talking about against Oregon. We know about Will Rogers. He's been replaced these last couple of games. Damon Williams came in against UCLA and really played well. Jed Fish kind of kept it close to the vest when asked about it this week. He said, obviously, he knows he's going to play, but he wasn't going to reveal it. I think the curveball here is, Rogers needs 26 completions to finish first on the all-time NCAA completions list, passing Case Keenum. Has Jed given him the opportunity to do that? It's clear Williams is his quarterback of the future. So I'm interested to see kind of how Jed plays that and whether or not we see Will Rogers.
Yeah, great point. And Dan Lanning said, hey, look, they've both played, so we're going to be ready for both of them no matter what. Last thing for me, I'm excited to see how many Big Ten teams will ultimately be bowl eligible. You look at the standings, we have 12 teams with 6 or more wins right now. And Wisconsin and Michigan State, if they were to win this weekend, could make it 14. So the league obviously has never had 14 teams that are bowl eligible because up until this year, they haven't had more than 14 teams in the league. But it would be really significant for Jonathan Smith to get in the Spartans to the postseason in his first year. And we already, of course, talked about the importance of the Badgers keeping that 22-year bowl streak alive. So 14 bowl eligible teams, Dave, I'm here for it.
All right. I'm here for it, too. That show on Selection Sunday will be it will be action-packed, I would
Bonanza.
say. We're going to get 14 in. I'm going to stay with one of those teams hoping to be bowl eligible. I think there's a little more at stake in the Rutgers-Michigan State game than people might expect. At Michigan State, you mentioned Jonathan Smith. I think it's really big for them to see whether or not they can make a bowl game. I think it's a big game for Rutgers, too. If they win this game, actually, it guarantees them a winning season for the second straight year, which when you consider all of the adversity that they've been through this year with the injuries, 4-game losing streak, all that, I think it's a big game for both teams. Final thoughts?
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, can I just say as we say goodbye, I want to say happy Thanksgiving to you. I'm thankful for you. This has been an awesome year, and I hope you have a great day with Michelle and the girls.
Right back at you with Chris and your family. Thanks, Ashley.